You're tuning in to Geek Speak, a Geek Insider production. We're sitting with special guests in entertainment, news, and tech. So sit back and enjoy the show as we geek out together right now. Hello, everybody. This is Meredith Loughran with Geek Insider, and this is Geek Speak. Our special guest today is Matt Rosenblatt. He is a writer and director. You gotta go and check his movies out. They are short films, award-winning with a few of these things. And I am also sitting with a co-chair. Normally, you see him on Mondays with Comics Talk. We have C. Michael Lanning here. Let me drop the card here so everybody can say hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, Matt. So it's really good to have you here. I saw something popping up on my Twitter feed that was for movie night. And I was like, oh, let me go check this out. And I was like, and after I saw it, I was like, I gotta talk to you.
I appreciate that.
Because I love horror and and it's so short. I don't want to give anything away, but man, it blew my socks off because it is right up my alley. And I think C kind of had the same reaction.
Yeah, like I said, this morning when I was talking to you, I saw it and I was like, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Definitely very impressive.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
So now there's short movies and things like that. It's kind of like, some people, how they feel about flash fiction. It's not for everybody. And there are a lot of people who really appreciate it, but it's not easy for everybody. You've had a few of these films. What is that process like for you? I mean, is that where you love to be? Are you kind of striving towards, hey, let me get a few of these under my belt, and then we're working towards a feature film? What does this look like, this path?
Well, I mean, basically right now I'm officially like working on a feature. So that's kind of like my path right now. Just in the writing process. Had a few conversations with a few people that I've worked with before. Just put out feelers, basically like, hey, what do you think of this idea? What if we tried this thing, and seeing what they think. And, I have people that I like to work with like on a regular basis. So, I like to collaborate and, create like the most cohesive vision while staying like true to myself. But yeah, I mean, like as far as like a process goes, I mean, I don't know. I'm like super slow about it. I typically like I have at least minimum like 12 ideas coming in my head before I finally get something that I'm like actually excited about to work on and be like, okay, this is the movie I'm doing. That's typically why my like stuff like kind of staggered out basically. But I mean, like I love it. It's a love-hate relationship because I typically don't have the patience to do all this stuff. But that big thing is just like kind of like making myself like persevere through it.
Mm-hmm. Now that is not easy to have the discipline to sit there, especially when you are the writer. And so you said that you always have these ideas that are kind of floating in your head. How do you pick the one and you just go, oh yeah, that's the one that I want to develop a little bit further. Let's see how far we can take it.
It typically basically just stems from like what stays in my head the longest. Like a lot of stuff will like hang around for a little bit, and then it just kind of leaves, and I'll be like, typically like the formula goes like I think about it for a few days, and I'm like, okay, I could do that, and just kind of like think about the entire like structure of everything, and then like day 8 or 9 hits, and I'm like, I don't really want to do this anymore, and I come up with something new in my head. So basically, it's like whatever just kind of stays the longest in my brain. Like most of my stuff is kind of like started from either like personal experience or like either personal experience or like dreams I'm having. So like that's kind of like what sticks the most. Like movie night was kind of like stemmed from a dream I was having, and like it went through a lot of like funnels and avenues and basically became what it was today. But yeah, I mean it's tough. Like I have no no patience with myself essentially.
I know that feeling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now, see, I didn't know if you had a question. I didn't want to stomp on you.
Well, no, because I think it's interesting. No, go ahead. What you have, and I have a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. So I love with Geek Insider. I love getting the Genesis story from people that we sit with. You know, was movies something that you've always wanted to do, or was it? I mean, there's some people who say it's my plan B, or I kind of fell into this on accident and stuff. I mean, is this path that you're on? Is it purposeful, or is it kind of like, how'd I get here?
I would say it's very purposeful. Basically, when I was 4, I think I watched like 4 or 5. I watched like a string of movies. It was like 2001: A Space Odyssey, like Jurassic Park, and I think Scream. And I was like, I don't really know what this is, but I want to do it. And then it just kind of like stuck. Like, in middle school, I wrote a lot. In like high school, I wrote a lot and did like theater. And then there was like a film program that we had at our high school and got to do that. Got to do some work with DIF, like Dallas International Film Festival. And then in college, I studied film. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of like where I fully got to like start being somewhat serious about it. I mean, like it always goes where your first couple things that you make, it's like really bad. So you're kind of trying to like learn, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? And picking out of that. But yeah, I mean, it's very much purposeful. Like, this is what I want to do. I've been fortunate so far to have it work out so far. I mean, like, I wouldn't say like by any means like I've like quote unquote like made it or anything like that, but I mean, like, I've been fortunate enough to be in the spot I am and like work with the people I work with and have met the people I've met from doing movie stuff. So I mean, it's like a pleasure and an honor to have been like gotten this far. So I'm just hoping to continue and keep growing and like keep learning and learning from others and learning from myself. So
That's pretty cool because, some people, they kind of start on the journey and they're like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So having that sense of purpose is really cool because then you can kind of, and I know you said that it's difficult because you have all of these ideas and stuff like that and maybe finding that focus, but the greater picture is this is what I want to do. Like, how am I going to get there? And I think that's really cool. Now, how was your family with this? Because I know, like, because I feel like I'm the creative one in the family, but my parents never understood me. They're like, what do I do with this child?
I would say they were like quite supportive actually. I when it started off, they were kind of like, well, how are you going to do this? Like, don't you want to like go to school?
Don't you want to pay your bills?
Yeah. And so it was kind of like that at first. But like, it was, I guess it came from like more of a context of like, it felt like they were challenging me to kind of just like persevere through that like critique of like, hey, you might not be able to do this, or like maybe you should like have a backup plan. And, there's nothing wrong with like a backup plan or anything like that. But, once I got to school and really started making stuff, that's whenever like it became like more so like the cheerleader type of energy where they were like, oh wow, like really proud of what you're doing, and it's nice to hear. But then I'm over here like, man, my next thing is going to be like 20,000 times better than this thing. And like, so it's like it goes out and then they're like, oh, you do such a good job, like we're proud of you. And I'm like, this is not good, like I can do so much better. So but it's nice. Like, I know a lot of people don't have that support, and I've been fortunate enough to have that support both from a like cheerleading standpoint. They are very like forward thinking in terms of like they always want to like be involved. Like, they'll be like, hey, do you need money for like whatever you're doing next? And be like, here's like a little bit of money and whatever we can do. Like in 2 of my things we shot in my dad's house, so like he has volunteered his place for us before. But yeah, I mean, it's just been incredibly supportive, and I'm pretty lucky for that.
I was going to say, warning to Dad, as his films progress, you might not want to volunteer your house. I'm just saying. I recently spoke to another director who was just like, yeah, we had a scene where, like the room was on fire, and they were like, yeah, all right. And he's like, do you understand we're putting the room on fire?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I haven't really spooked him with anything like that. Like the most extensive thing has been like, hey, like we're gonna do some like rearranging of your home, and he's like, okay. And then it's just like, all right, please make my home normal again. So that's kind of like the extent of like what it's been. Nothing like, hey, we're gonna put a bunch of blood on the floor. Like, hey, we're really gonna mess up your home. So I think he's like waiting, I guess, one day for me to be like, hey, so we're gonna do something crazy here, and I feel like he's gonna be like, you gotta find something else.
Right.
So maybe you don't want to do that.
Yeah. So, when you're coming up with the ideas and things like that, do you often put it down as prose, or do you kind of think in scripts or like picture panels, thumbnails, or how does that work for you?
I typically think very visually. I enjoy writing, but I think as I've gotten older, the love has gone away a little bit. So I think much more from like a director context. So, I can visualize, if I can't like visualize what the movie's going to be from start to beginning, I'm like, it's not really worth it. And that's like kind of like the big thing. And like, that comes down to like, okay, where are we going to like do this type of thing? Like I need to know exactly where I'm going to do this before we even like write it. And like that way I can write to that. And I know that'll, change as things progress. But, that's kind of how I am right now is I really need to like visualize everything first and kind of like not so much like draw anything out, but like I really like think it in my head and like visualize everything that's going to happen like beat by beat. And I go, okay, well, who are the people behind this? Like who are the characters? Like what are they doing? And then just kind of going from there with it. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the way I work. But as far as like a writing context goes, I would say like I write very visually, like from a context of like a production style script where it's like, hey, the camera is going to be right here and like this person's going to move this way and like things are going to be there and like at the corner, this is going to be here. So like, it's kind of like that. And it's like really detrimental. Like it's nice because it's like I try my best to put detail in, but it's like detrimental because like when I write it and then like I send it to people, they're like, none of this matters right now. Like just tell us the story. So and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I kind of have to scale it back right now. So yeah, that's kind of like how I work.
When it comes to doing indie films, a lot of times the biggest challenges are finding funding. Have you, working on a tight budget, how have you been able to approach, maybe some of your actors or even like your crew?
I guess in the context, like I've been fortunate enough to where people have volunteered their time for our productions, and like that's been incredibly fortunate. Movie night I think was the first time I like actually paid the actors because they were the people I was working with was like a bit more larger tier than I'd worked before. So I was like, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, I'll pay you. And like they kind of, I think they kind of forgot whenever I told them that, because like whenever it all wrapped, I was like, here you go. And they were like, oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So that was kind of like how it went down. But
wait, you mean I didn't have to pay you? Hold on.
Yeah. But I mean, like it's been fortunate. Like people are very willing to work within your budgetary constraints, at least in my experience, which has been nice. I know that'll change the bigger things get. But yeah, I mean, like I've been incredibly fortunate in that regard, and it's really lent itself to like putting money towards a lot of production design aspects and like clothing and like food to feed everybody. So
food's
it's been
important.
Yeah, it definitely is.
It's like you go for a move and you ask your friends. It's like, hey, I'm gonna have pizza and beer. They're like, I'm in.
Yeah.
You have nothing, and they're like, dude. Well, don't call me again.
Yeah, actor has to have their motivation. So
yeah.
You're hungry. Can you feel it?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so now I understand that you are submitting this or have submitted this to the festival circuit. How's that going for you?
It's been a rather large, pleasant surprise so far. Um, I feel fortunate enough to, I think we've gotten into like 22 fests so far, and we're waiting to hear back from, I don't know, at least 10 more at this point. So I've, been super lucky, and like I got into two like dream festivals of mine, like Salem Horror Fest and Lone Star Film Festival out here in Dallas. But like, I mean, the response has been quite positive for the most part. I mean, like naturally you kind of get that negative stuff too, but it's really interesting to hear that stuff as well. Cause like I find out like, okay, well, what do you think like is not working for you? And sometimes I get to have a conversation with those people and they kind of spell it out for me. I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting to hear. And, if that's kind of like a consensus thing, I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's something I should work on going forward. But it's been nice. Like I'm pretty overwhelmed by like the positivity that's come through so far. Um, it's definitely new. Like every week or every other week, it feels like someone's reaching out where they're like, "Hey, we want to do like a review, or like we want to do like a press write up, or like." We'd love to talk to you about this. So like, it's been really surprising. And I'm just like super honored, I guess, to like elicit people wanting to, talk about it and support it. So it's been a nice surprise.
So for the budding filmmaker who's out there, they've got a short film. What's that process like? To say, okay, I have a film, and try and submit that anywhere, because from what I was looking at, you're kind of keeping it local as far as Texas, but then you said that there are other ones that you're really happy to be in. That on top of creativity has got to be pretty prohibitive for you.
I guess how do you mean per se?
Well, I mean, so like, you've got a film out there. Obviously, you want to get it known. A lot of creative people are not very good at marketing. Festivals are a great way of getting that in front of people, but some people just don't know how. Like, what is the start point? What advice can you give?
One of the big things I would do is like just submit it. Like I would say like starting out, keep it local, because if you're able to go those festivals, there's more of an inclination you're probably going to get in, and there's more networking opportunities. I've been fortunate enough to meet quite a few people in Texas, in the festival circuit who I view as friends and like collaborators and fellow like filmmakers today. So it's been like, that's one of the things I would say. Another big thing I do to like try and get it around is I like go to Reddit. I post a lot of like all the links and just find like channels like, all right, / horror films, or like r / short films, or r / like Vimeo, and just put it in there and be like, hey, like, this is something that I made. I'm really just trying to get better as a storyteller, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, good or bad. And surprisingly, like it's incredibly terrifying because I never know what's going to come out. Fortunately, I have heard mostly positive things back from Reddit. Where I found out that like things were getting a little negative was like the Letterboxd app. Like that was where people were like, I don't know how I feel about this, and I was like, oh, that kind of hurts. But that's kind of like the one of the best like mechanisms, and just kind of like doing your best to just get it out. I mean, like, I don't, that's kind of a tough question to answer, I guess, because so many people do it different ways, but those are like the ways that I've found to be like the most productive so far for me. And, I've been fortunate enough for that.
Now, I see, obviously you love horror. I mean, movie night is just one of those things where it'll totally creep you out. And there's a certain amount of realism in it that just makes it like really scary. I love that kind of storytelling. Is that kind of a theme that you like to do, or is there kind of like a bigger, like gory, maybe sci-fi? I mean, how are you planning on branching out as far as your creativity? And do you plan on staying in horror, or are you looking at other genres?
I mean, as far as like realism goes, I try my best to like be as honest as possible. And like the way I tell a story, and like I get that movie night is not something that happens on a regular basis, and I
It
certainly hope.
could.
Yeah, I mean,
It
I certainly
could.
hope not. Like, I mean, that would be very unfortunate to. But like with that in particular, I like came from uh a background for initially it was going to be more like supernatural, but I was like, this isn't really working, and then I kind of went more of that like true crime like
Suspense.
backdrop. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like I was just like, okay, like I think at the time I was watching a lot of Mindhunter, and I was like, all right, this is really influencing me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, how do I create this like person that's like doing these things? So I was like, I took that, and then I took like the backdrop of like nowadays in the world, like online dating is like incredibly prevalent. And that to me, it's like, I found my partner like on online dating, and luckily nothing movie night related came close in the slightest there. But like a lot of people like are truly terrified some of their first dates they go on, because like sometimes it's the first time you meet somebody is in their home.
Yeah.
And from both contexts that's terrifying. Like I've been in that situation where I was like, I feel like I'm about to walk in this door and die in an hour. So I was like, okay. And like, from a female perspective, like that has to be even more terrifying, in my opinion. So I really wanted to take that element and like dramatize it to the best I could, with like trying my best to keep honest. But as far as like a general sense, like horror is kind of like the realm I like to live in. That's like what I've been doing more recently. I have worked in the drama genre as well, and so I think I like to like bounce between those. So like I like to elicit fear, and I kind of like to elicit real incredibly like melancholic moods as well. But going forward, like horror is kind of like what I like to live in. I know a lot of people that work in it and live in it. So and like that's what I grew up on. Like that was like the stuff that I loved. So like my next thing is going to be a horror. So I mean, like, yeah, that's kind of that.
Is there a genre that you probably wouldn't do?
I'm not sure. I don't think I'm very funny, so I wouldn't say comedy. I would probably stay away from that. I yeah, like I don't think I'm very funny. If anything, it's like in a very ironic manner, or like unintentionally funny. So I'd probably like stay away from comedies just because I don't really know how to do that timing wise. But I mean, like I'm not opposed to trying if the opportunity ever presented itself. I mean, like I'm open to anything, whatever's in my head, and if it's like really calling to me, and if it happens to be like a romance or a comedy or a drama, or even like a Western or something, like I don't know when that day will come, but I'm open to anything and everything, just whatever's coming up in my head.
So now, kind of circling back to movie night, it's under 10 minutes with the final edit. How long was it before the editor got to it? And yeah, let's answer that one first.
I think it was around 10 to 12. Initially, there was a whole scene before everything, like before where the movie initially starts, to kind of give a little bit more like context for what was going on. But we found that it slowed the pace down immensely. So we were kind of like, okay, well, we can't really go back and reshoot anything. And if we take these 3 minutes out, like it'll really speed things up. So on the plus side, we got really good pacing out of it, I think. But on the downside, we lost a little bit of context for like who these people are and why they're here. So it kind of like put people in a guessing mode more so. And that's kind of like one of the big things I've heard back is like, I wish there's a little bit more context for like who these people are and why they're here. Like I can assume, but I wish there's a little bit more. And I agree. I mean, like that's just one of the things that comes down to like naturally you're going to make like 100 mistakes, if not more.
But let me just say this much though. The context of who they are didn't seem as important as the emotion that you conveyed in their characters, the discomfort that settles over both of these characters in this. I don't think the context of who they are really mattered as far as this is concerned, and I think he did that well. So the fact that we don't know who they are kind of plays into the narrative of that first date, because they don't even know who each other are either, for that matter. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, like, anytime like I have to make like a big narrative change, I'm like, okay, I need to sit on it for a few hours, and I'm like, how do I justify this to where if somebody asks me, oh, why'd you do that, I can be like, I have an answer, rather than being like, so I mean, like, I'm pretty pleased with it, and I mean, like, some people will like it, some people won't, and I mean, like, unfortunately, like, I'm glad you enjoyed that aspect of things, so it kind of worked itself out. But yeah, no, I appreciate it though.
Are there any of your short films that you've kind of wanted to go back on and maybe do a reboot, maybe make it more of a feature so that you could do those character developments?
Yeah, I mean, my last film I did before movie night was titled Deep as the Sea, Blue as the Sky. And that one was like really personal to me, because I lived that story and that narrative. So I was trying to make something that was still a story, but it was a story about a topic that was quite personal to myself. And I've always wanted to tell that story in a longer format as well, and really invest myself more so into who these people are. And like, obviously they're based off of real people, but you kind of have to create your own story in your own world at the same time, to where you're not crossing the narrative with the real life aspect of things. So, and I think that with that one, I rushed it a little bit, because I was just like, that's what I want to do, and I know I'm going to do it. I mean, I'm happy with it, and I'm happy with how it turned out. I'm like happy as I can be with it, I should say. But I mean, like, I would love to go back and revisit that one, because I feel like, I think I made it when I was like 21 or 22, something like that, and I've got a couple more years of like learning since then, and slightly like more understanding of myself from that event. So I think that's, like, the big one I would like to redo. But when it comes to redoing things, I mean, like, I feel like I want to redo everything like the minute it's like out. Once it's out, I'm like, ah, man, I could have done this, and this would have worked a little bit better. So I mean, like, I guess in some ways I'd like to remake everything that I do, but that one specifically I would.
and that's got to be a hard thing to be able to balance between atmosphere and character context, because
Yeah.
you can add character context, but sometimes that could take away from that atmosphere. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, I feel like I play more in the atmosphere world, like, and I think that comes from like my initial love of like horror, because so much of like that genre is atmosphere, and it can be non-atmospheric as well. But that I think is like the thing that I'm like, okay, what is this movie gonna feel like, and what is it gonna like look like? So I think that's like one of the things I'm like put myself into a lot, is the atmosphere of things.
Mhm. So, and again, for the people who are maybe looking into creating films and stuff like that, can you give an idea of how much time it takes to film, maybe even five? I mean, because your film again is under 10 minutes. How long did that take? How long was that process?
With movie night, we shot it in 2 days.
Hmm.
I think we went like 10 hours or 12 hours both days, something like that. And then the turnaround process was really quick. I think we finished it on the post production side in like 2 to 4 months, something
Oh,
like that.
wow. Hmm.
So, like, we didn't have a score for it. So that saved a lot of time. We were going like a very diegetic sound based on things. So, you know, my editor for that one, Carson Bailey, he also shot the movie as well. Like, he's brilliant, and he works really fast. Like, he, understands like what I want and what he wants out of it. So once it's like done, he just like sits down and like puts together a rough cut for you in like 48 hours, because he's just like, I want to do it. And he's like, here you go. Here's everything that like I think this is based off of the conversations we had. And it was like, okay, wow. So I think we went from like only like through 4 cuts of this thing once we were like, okay, this is done. Like this is it. And then we did some like sound recording for effects and everything like that, shipped it off to the designers and editors, and I went out and hired people this time around, and that sped the process up exponentially. I think they only took like a week, maybe 2, to finish it. So like once it was all there, like it was just coloring from there, which only took like a day or 2 from that. And yeah, it was super quick. So I was like really lucky because my other things have been much longer processes.
The I think the trust that you have with an editor is kind of critical, because there's got to be some times when you're like, no, but you have to trust them. You're kind of in a vulnerable place because they're basically taking your baby and ripping it apart.
Yeah, and I mean, like, for me, it's like whenever I bring somebody on, like I want somebody that's one gonna challenge me, and one is like the nice fit to this puzzle we're trying to create. So like I don't necessarily like want somebody just because like they're talented. I want somebody that's like kind of like a camaraderie sense of things, where it's like I feel like I can sit at the table and like break bread with you, and I am like entrusting you with this and like part of myself. So, Carson was like really great about understanding like what you want to do, and like what he wanted to do. Like I mean, it wasn't like a sole thing of like he was just following my lead or anything. Like he very much so, you know, understood. And like I was fortunate, because he shot it and edited it. So I mean, like with that, we really got to create like how is this thing gonna be flow from shot to shot. So I mean, like that conversation already was had when we like made a storyboard and shot list for this thing. So the conversation really didn't have to happen once we got to editing it, because he already knew what I wanted to do and what he wanted to do. So from there, it was just doing it basically. And, he's really efficient and like super detail oriented, and honestly, like one of the like most intelligent people I've ever worked with, probably maybe even like one of the most intelligent person I've worked with. And like probably one of the most creatively talented people. So I mean, like he's amazing, and he like I don't have enough praise. Like I could praise him for hours on like the work he's done. So I mean, like he's a genius, basically, is what I'm trying to get at.
So why well, maybe I shouldn't ask that. Have you tried submitting some of your films to video on demand? Because like Vimeo right now is that's free for everybody to watch.
Yeah. I kind of, yeah. I mean, like I think that once the festival run's done, we'll get it on Prime. I just don't really want to put it on just yet. I'm trying really hard to get it on Shudder. But that's kind of a tougher thing. So like I know that I kind of have to go through a few different people and avenues for that. I've got it on one site right now. Well, I guess two or three sites. Like I have it on Think Shorts, and then I have it on this site called Movie Hub, and then it just got published by Indie Short Mag, so I think it kind of lives there too now. So I think, as far as like other sites, it kind of lives in a couple other places, but I would like to get it on Shudder. I know that's like they don't take a lot of shorts, so that's a really tough thing to get through. But it'll probably go on Prime whenever I'm like finished with the festival run, because I really don't want to like compromise getting into anything by having it on Prime.
I mean, because that's tough. It's like, for the most part, so many people, I think when they're thinking about a career path in entertainment, they don't realize how much time and effort and sometimes money it takes to pursue these things. And at the end of the day, you really hope for discovery, pay the bills, doing what you do, doing what you love. And that has to lead to some tough times, I'd say. Have you found moments when you're like, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah, a little bit. Um, you know, it's tough. You know, because like, even no matter what you're making, like shorts, it's like it's impossible to like make money off of it. Like it, you know, or like get like large scale notoriety. Like, because most people are like, you know, it's there to play at festivals and it's fun, but like, you know, really until you like make something full length, it you know, it doesn't really garner that attention. So I mean, like at times it's like, you know, what am I doing? You know, is this worth it? Type of thing. I think that's just like the natural like argument I have in my head where I'm like, you know, I could kind of like um just kind of like accept where I'm at. Um but I think I'm like too scared to do that. Because I wrestle with myself constantly with like this idea of like if I accept where I'm at or if like I'm happy with where I'm at, like I'm just gonna accept it and I'm not gonna do anything else. But yeah, I mean it's very tumultuous. It's not an easy road just to get where I've been able to get. So it's one of the hardest things to do because everybody feels like they have an idea that millions of people will love, and you know that idea is probably true that like people will love that, but there's people and like gatekeepers and like stuff like that where they're like, I don't think people are going to love this. And sometimes you go through like 12 to 20 people and then somebody goes like, yeah, I want to take a chance on you, and then like, you know, sometimes you're right and sometimes it's like it just kind of like fades into like the back end of like the Netflix horror section or like the Prime horror section or whatever genre you're doing, or you know, it doesn't pan out the way you want it to. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of like free fall almost, where you're like, yeah, it's just tough. I don't know, like it's really hard.
Yeah. And now Paige is tuning in. Thank you for tuning in over here. Paige Cullen asks, how does he think the future of Texas film is?
Um, I don't know, honestly. I actually just had like I just did an interview where they asked me if I thought I was the future, and that was a really daunting question. I don't know, honestly. Like there's some guys I really admire and appreciate. They you know, their names are like Ryan Polly and Daniel Routh. And I think the stuff they do is like it's fantastic, and I really like, you know, I'm fortunate enough to be friends with them, and hope that I kind of like have half the talent that they have and like just like half the like energy they have, because they're every time I talk to them they're just like, yeah, like I'm in it, like I'm ready, I'm excited. um I don't know though, because it's tough. There's a lot of people out there making stuff, so I don't I don't know if I have an answer for that, because there's just hundreds of people and I only know like 30 of them or something. So, and I think all of them are more talented than I am. So,
Well, you know, it's kind of funny too, because when someone's asking you, do you think you're the future of film? And if you say yes, oh my gosh, he's an egomaniac. What a jerk. I don't want to work with him. You know, I mean, so you kind of
yeah.
have to balance that too. That's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if you would have asked me that question like 3 years ago, I would have said absolutely me. But now I feel like I've humbled myself to a degree where I'm like, all right, you know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I think that confidence still lives there with like the optimism. I'm like, maybe I am, but I don't know. Like, I hope so. I guess that's like the best answer. I hope I am, because that would be really cool. But you know, if somebody thinks that, like, great, and if somebody doesn't, you know, so be it. Like, it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, I hope so. Um, but I have no clue, really.
Now, you alluded to this, that you were going to be or are working on a feature film. What's that like to jump from something that is, you know, anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to something that could be 90 minutes?
Um, it's like both daunting and like exciting at the same time. It's daunting because you're like, okay, do I have enough story to tell to go 90 minutes? And then it's exciting because you're like, okay, now I finally get to like really invest myself and like give people proper like long form arcs more so. I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of getting overwhelmed, because I do this like every day, where I'm like, I've got like however many pages this thing's going to be to do. And, I find that if I don't let myself think about that, it works itself out a lot better. But it's like a mix of excitement and being incredibly daunting. So.
And if there was another medium that you would want to work in, what would that be? Because okay, let me elaborate a little bit here. At Geek Insider, we have a lot of people who are developing and creating comic books. But some of them, they really see like the next step is taking their comics, taking those scripts, and maybe turning it into small screen or big screen. Go ahead, see what were you going to say?
And see that kind of I want to kind of double back on something you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You made the statement about how you're kind of getting disillusioned with writing. How are you going to feel as excited about doing somebody else's project, directing it, as you would your own?
I think so, yeah. I mean, like, I wouldn't put myself in a position where it's a story I don't feel like I could tell, because I'm not going to be disingenuous to myself or like that author. Because like if I'm not right, I'm going to know, and I'm not going to force it, because
Right.
it's just going to end up being not good. But if there's something that I see and I'm like, I need my hands on that, I'm going to do it. I would love to adapt somebody else's work if the opportunity ever presents itself, because it'd be a new challenge. Like, everything I've done has come from my own brain, and I would love to take somebody else's words and be like, okay, what is this story to me, while staying true to like what they're saying.
Right. Has there been anybody like that? Have you seen anything that stood out to you? It's like, man, I'd really like to direct that.
There is a short story that I actually reached out to the author for a couple years ago. It was either a year or two ago. They had their short story featured on the No Sleep podcast. And it was a short story called A Tailwind. And I loved it. And I really wanted to take that idea and try and make it my own, without like, 'cause I mean, like it took place in like the 90s in Florida. And I was like, well, I don't live in Florida and it's not the 90s. So like, and I don't have the money to make those things happen.
Right.
So I was like, how do I tell this story, keeping like the bones of it? And I was like, okay, I think I have something here. And I reached out to him, and he was like, yeah, for sure, you can like adapt it. And at the time I was just merely talking like a short film. I'd love to adapt it long form, because I learned that it's kind of a tough one to tell in a short form, because you're losing a lot of like the key elements to what that story was about. But yeah, I mean, like, that's kind of one of the things. I have like games I really want to adapt if I ever make it to a level of stardom or notoriety that people are like, we want to do this with this guy. Like there's plenty of like games that I'm like enamored with, like the lore, like the story, that I'm like, one day I would love to do that. But aside from that, like, I don't think there's like too much stuff. Like, I'm a firm believer of like keeping mediums like within themselves. If the author wants to adapt their book into a movie, or their comic into a movie or graphic novel or game or whatever, like, I think it's on them to do so. But if somebody comes to me and is like, I want to entrust you with this and I want to turn it into this, like, that would be a huge honor. But if an opportunity ever comes up, like, there's a few games I would love to adapt.
And that was kind of like what I was going towards, is that working in the reverse, because there are a lot of people who they do those things. They write the book, they do the comic books and stuff like that. And it seems like the brass ring for a lot of people are, hey, let's make a film from it. Have you thought about maybe going in reverse? It's like, hey, I have this short film. I wonder what that would look like.
I thought about it, but I don't think I don't know like how to design a game. And I am a horrendous drawer. So I don't think I could like adapt something into a comic book or anything, like a graphic novel. And I guess the only ever like avenue I've thought about is like writing a book. But at that point, I think I'd just be like, I need to like make this thing visual more so than like word based. So I think like I'd get fall out of love with like the written element of it and be like, this needs to be like visual, because that's just like kind of how I naturally think. So
And yep, go ahead, C.
I'm curious. You had made the statement, you're talking about wanting to adapt that the story, and that you weren't in the 90s, you couldn't really have that. How much stuff? Like, say if you had to give a percentage of what you start off with on your story and what you envision is changed by what you can do.
I think in most instances, I think very small scale, just because I know like what the limitations are for myself. Like one of the big like filmmakers and film groups I'm really inspired by is this one called the Dogma 95 movement. And that's like consistent of like more prominent guys like Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg. And they, did so much of so little. Like they got big whenever like the camcorders came out and digital cameras were coming out. So I think I'm big on like, I feel like even like at large scale on things, like I'd think, okay, what can I do with the least amount possible? So that's kind of like how I think naturally. Just because like I accept the realism that like, I'm probably not going to get X thousands to make something. So, that's kind of just like how I think. I'm like, okay, where can I do this? Like, who can I do this with? What do I have at my disposal to do this with?
Kind of a minimalist approach in a way.
Yeah, I would say that like, I think at heart, I like the idea of wanting to be like a maximalist, but I think truly like I think if you asked most people, they would say I'm stark minimalist. So, and I just try to live in that world pretty frequently.
It takes a certain amount of talent to convey all of the ideas that you have and make a complete story arc from beginning to end in such a short amount of time. I'm sure people have asked how you do that. Because when it comes to writing down the words, if you are a writer, we love our words. And a lot of times we do need that editor to cut it out. Has anybody approached you and said, you need to make that a little longer?
Yeah, I mean, I've had people come and say like, this should be shorter or this should be longer. I've had that, I think, with every project that I've done. So, whether it be like people I don't know or, acquaintances or, collaborators. So like it's happened often. So, and like not in like a malice type of way. It's just been like, hey, maybe try it this way. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I think on it, I'm like, yeah, or no, I don't really want to do that right now.
Mm-hmm. And what motivates you to keep going? Because let me say, 2020 was really rough on a lot of people. There are a lot of people who kind of put pencils down, and then there were people who were like, nope, I'm just going to put my head down because I have the time now to focus on my writing. And it seems like you are in the latter. You kind of you put your head down, you got to writing, you submitted things for the festival track, and you kept on going. I think that puts you ahead of a lot of people, ahead of the curve. What was the biggest challenge for you in this past year?
I think it was just being motivated. Like the last year, I kind of like fell a little bit out of love with storytelling, and until recently, it kind of came back. So like for the last year, I was just like kind of like, I don't really know what I want to do. And like, what do I want to tell about? Or like, what do I want to talk about? Like, what do I want to say as a person to a potential audience of one or thousands, like that was kind of like my mindset. And I was really like lost in that because I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And I have a couple of things I want to do, but I don't have the motivation to do them right now. And until recently, like a couple weeks ago, like maybe a month ago, like I had a conversation with a composer that I've worked with a few times. And, he was just like, kind of like relit the like spark in me. And like, I kind of like fell back in love with like storytelling and movies a little bit. where I was like, okay, like I'm kind of back a little bit now. So I mean, like, yeah, like it was tough because like I would love to say that like I fell into the category of like just putting my head down and like going with it, but I definitely felt like I really just like maybe I don't know if it was like type of like a sabbatical or like just like a break or like mentally I was kind of fried, but you know, I was just like really like not knowing what to do for the last year or so.
Yeah, I think that was in the air. It's just that kind of feeling was going around, just this blah. But I
Yeah.
want to ask you, in your filmography, though, that I found was interesting. And Hitchcock, when Hitchcock did his movies, he wanted the audience to feel like they're part of it. I noticed that you had the camera move in such a way that you didn't reveal anything. And like, what inspired you to move the camera that way? Like, you're following a character, you're moving a character in and out.
I think that's just kind of like for one, like that was like perspectively, I was like, okay, I want to make sure that this Rachel, the main character, was the central focus. And like with the context of the people and the story and the situation, I was like, it doesn't make sense to have this guy on camera alone because we're immediately suspect of him. And to me, like making it at times where it's like, well, we don't know where he is. So is he still on the couch or did he like move? Or like, what is he doing? Like, you know, so like that was kind of that. And like, I felt like for this type of story, like at times it fell into the perspective of this killer. So, I mean, like I wanted to feel like kind of voyeuristic. And I think I was inspired by, a film I had produced. It was called, I don't know if like I think the full title of it was like We Will See the Sunrise, but we just called it Sunrise. And you know like Carson shot and edited that as well, and Riley Cusick, the guy that one of the guys that produced Movie Night, and I worked with both of them quite frequently. Like they did that with theirs, and I was like, okay, that's really interesting. And I was like, and they did it in such a way that it worked for them, and I was like, I kind of want to do something like that. So I feel like in some ways I was inspired by them. But like for the story, like that was just kind of like how I wanted to do it. I also like to try my best to like make things somewhat interesting, camera wise, you know, like I like to make things for the sake of eliciting a response from an audience. So, you know, that's kind of,
did that also play to the props because that had to be an uncomfortable couch?
I actually, well, it's semi comfy, I guess.
I mean, but I guess my question is because I guess it's more of a love seat and how close it was together. It really piled on that discomfort that you were going for in that.
Yeah. I mean, like it you know, that it created like this like level of like intimacy, that like forced intimacy. And I don't really know if I was like thinking that in the back of my head when we were doing it. I think I was just like, I like how this couch looks aesthetically.
Yeah.
It's red and I like it. And I was like, let's do that. And it just kind of like, I've had a few people like bring that up. And then I think I heard like a podcast talk about Movie Night, and they said that couch seemed a little too small for Skeeta, the like guy who played Chris. And I was like, well, I guess they really looked into that. And I was just like, there was no like thought behind it. And I was like, well, I guess they were really diving in. And, you know, so that was like an interesting thing to see. And, but yeah, I mean, like there was honestly, like, I wish I could say I had like really big intention behind that. It just kind of worked itself out.
It was subconscious genius. That's what that is.
I guess so. I mean, like it worked out. Basically, it was a happy accident.
When and you say it was a red cat. Now, when you talk about colors in a movie, a lot of times we don't really take that into consideration. How much consideration do you take in putting colors on film?
Pretty strong. I feel like I like things I like my world to be like a neutral, vibrant, I guess.
Yeah.
Basically look real, and like I want colors that stand out. Basically, so you know, take like I know that like the room that we shot in is fairly neutral toned. So we were like, okay, we've got this couch that'll like kind of liven the place up a bit. We'll have these pieces of art in the background that like will bounce color, and like, you know, this popcorn bowl will bring some color, and we'll have like these characters wear neutral colors, and like these things pop out to like, you know, contrast those. So you know, and like the production designer Kylie McLaughlin, like she really like took that to heart and like did like a really good job with that. So, and like we pretty much worked with what we had within the confines of like the home, and like I think we went and spent like $150 at like Target on like things that we needed, and you know, just went with
it. It worked really well, really well.
Now, we totally blew past a half an hour. We're almost at the hour mark. Matt, how are you doing over here?
Oh, I'm good. I think like once we started, like whatever fatigue was like in me just kind of like disappeared a little bit. So like I'm good.
Yeah.
But like once this finishes, I'll probably like sleep for a little bit.
Yeah. No, I did want to follow up with that with the last question, because you know, color is so important, because the visual aspect. One of the things that changed my life as a viewer, but also as a content creator, was the sixth sense, right? That following that color, and you didn't know it until the very end. You're like, oh my God, how did I not see that? And that bit of brilliance. And you know, a lot of times I feel like I need to incorporate that little bit when you're creating, whether you're writing, whether you are putting together the production team and things like that. What is that thread that you try to put in your films that kind of carries through, that says this is Matt Rosenblatt?
The style.
That's a good question, honestly. I don't know. I think that like my style has like evolved project by project. So I think probably like the biggest thing that I could like cement is probably like intimacy. And I mean that not just from like a context of like relational intimacy, but like in the context of like world building. You know, like I love big scale things, like big scale stories and big scale worlds. But I really love stories that are super intimate and super tight. Like something like, you know, Hush, or like something like um, I'm blanking on a lot of things right now, but there's a lot of stuff that like, you know, like something as simple as like Halloween, you know, that takes place in a neighborhood, and like you have this world of like a neighborhood, or like Chainsaw, or like Black Christmas, something like that. Like I love like intimate tales where you have a context of like how big the world is outside of like these walls, but the world we're being shown is super tight. So I guess if I had to like give myself something, that'd probably be it, because right now I don't have the desire to tell like big scale things. I like things that are tight, intimate, and like, you know, it's kind of that like idea.
It follows type of.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. And like that was one of, ironically enough, like It Follows was one of the inspirations for movie night, like aesthetically. So, you know, that was one of the things we looked at.
Yeah.
Now, as we're reaching the top of the hour, and we're going to close this out pretty soon, but tell us a little bit more about Deep as the Sea, Blue as the Sky. Like if you were to give the elevator pitch for that so that people can tune in.
Basically, takes place over a night, and it's about a family instantaneously grieving to like the loss of like their patriarch and like their mother. That's like the simplest way I can put it, but it focuses specifically on the main character, the son, and like how he specifically deals with this situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking about intimacy, definitely, you know, because that gets you right in the feels too. And then and movie night, you guys head over to Vimeo, Matt Rosenblatt, just like his name down there. Make sure that you head over there, give it a like. Now, where can they write reviews, or like how do you get feedback, Matt? How are people going to reach you?
I guess like the most direct way is to just comment on like the video on Vimeo. As far as like, I mean, like if there's other people that like write for websites or something and like want to do a review, like please do so. But whether it's good or bad. Like I would love to see it, but as I guess like the most direct way is like just commenting on the video and just being like, hey, I enjoyed this, or like, hey, like this wasn't for me, or like this just sucked, or something like that. So
no.
so whatever like people feel,
constructive criticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's somebody's baby, okay. And I think that is really about it. Matt Rosenblatt, thank you so much. Where can people follow you?
As far as like following, Twitter and Instagram are like probably like the most direct ways. It's just at Matt_Rosenblatt. And like typically I have like links to my Vimeo like in the bios and stuff. So, you can find like everything from there. But I mean, like, I just want to say thank you to you guys for, reaching out, wanting to do this. Like, it's like a pleasure to do interviews or talks or conversations about movie stuff. And if it happens to be about my stuff, like I'm self-indulgent enough to like want to talk about it. So, I really appreciate you guys reaching out, and wanting to sit down and talk about this and, help get the word out. So it means a lot. So.
Yeah, and we appreciate you taking the time too. And the festivals also now on the card here. I'm just going to pop this up. Best horror show short on movie night, and that was through the Super Indie Film Festival.com, which is really kind of cool. Where else do you have this submitted? And kind of like maybe waiting with bated breath for news about it.
So I mean, like as far as submissions go, like we got into a lot of things, like stuff in Austin, stuff in Dallas, stuff up northeast, stuff out west as well.
Mm-hmm.
But like as far as like what we're waiting to hear from, like I mean, there's a bunch of stuff like ranging from things overseas or like things still in Texas. Like I think like the big thing that I'm just kind of like anticipating now is Texas Frightmare weekend. They do that every year, like in Dallas at like DFW Airport. Mm-hmm. And I'm really hoping to get into there just because there's a lot of people I know that go to those festival or that conference basically. So I'm really hoping to get into that. But basically, I mean, I'm just kind of open to get into whatever. But I've been fortunate enough to like, I think we've won like 3 best horror awards and like best like twist, and like I think we've won 2 audience awards as well, and then like we won like a jury award. So
mm-hmm.
And then like we've been up for like a lot of awards in the midst of that. So like I'm just glad that people are enjoying it and feel that it kind of deserves this notoriety. So
mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean like right now I'm just kind of waiting on festivals. I think the next one I hear back from is in like the beginning of May, so should be hearing back pretty soon. But like I think like the festival run will be done in like December at the latest. So
mm-hmm.
we'll just have to see like what.
And
happens.
so what about like Comic Cons and things like that? Comic book readers love horror. A lot of them do. Have you thought about maybe trying a panel at something like a Spooky Empire or going to other con events?
I guess I haven't really thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really been like I guess aware fully of like the avenues that I could go with it. I guess I could look into those things, and if they would want to have me, like I'd be ecstatic to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I was just like unaware of those like avenues. It's something that I never really thought about as a route to go per se. But I mean, like I would love to look into it if that's like a possibility.
Awesome. And so on Geek Insider, we usually have one final question that we ask our guests. But see, before I ask it, do you have any other questions for Matt?
We would be a long time past this. Nothing, and there's a lot of questions I want to ask that would give away some stuff in there. So I don't want to do that. I want people
it's
to go
so hard because
watch it,
mm-hmm.
and then once they finish watching it, watch it again because it's a real good. It's a nice piece of art, really.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. I mean, if you want to ask these questions offline, I mean, like I'm happy to answer them. Whether you just want to like message me or something, like I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, because to go any further into the details, we totally give it away. And it's really hard because I'm sitting here like, I can't.
Yeah, I know, that's the thing. And see, that should show you something, guys. When you see that we want to keep asking questions, we could go for a long time. And this is a 7.5 second short that elicits these questions. So that just goes to show you, go watch it, go see it.
And so, Matt, the final question then is, if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
The simplest way would be like, don't be an asshole. Just don't. I think there's been many a times in my life where I've let like ego within myself or ego within somebody else get the better of me. And I think now I've like found the best medium to like just keep myself humbled and like still like keep like this like artistic passion that's like very like extrovert. But yeah, I mean, like just be kind, and like be nice to those that you want to work with or like don't want to work with. So, I mean, like that's probably like the best advice is just like, just be nice, just be a good person, be kind. So, I mean, like, I feel like that paints a picture that like I was like a big like dick or something like a few years ago or something. But I have learned I have learned in my like latter teens to early 20s. That, and I'm pretty happy with like where I stand with myself today.
That's awesome. And I think that does it for us. You guys head over to Matt_Rosenblatt on social media and make sure that you head over to Vimeo.com/Matt Rosenblatt. No underscore there. Take a look at his movies, give him some feedback, stay in touch with him. Matt, we hope to have you back when you have more announcements. I definitely want to hear how you're doing on the festival circuit and when you get that feature film created. On that note, you guys have a great evening. Thank you for tuning in to Geek Speak. Geek out. At Geek Insider, we foster relationships with those in the geek sphere so we can give our audience the insider view of entertainment,